So you see, there are great solutions already in place. Farmers doing the regenerative agriculture using cows and other ruminants to fertilize the land, but everybody is screaming climate change and the need to go vegan and shit like that, when this is all totally unnecessary. Regenerative farming is still practiced on a very small amount of US farmland, and carbon markets have yet to prove that they can be an effective incentive to get more farmers to adopt the environmentally friendly practices.
Sunbeams are the essence of poetry, dreams, fantasy, fairy tales, sunbeams. And yet, as esoteric and mystical as sunbeams are, they are the energy driver of the planet in a very visceral, physical, scientific, empirical sense. But if I asked you to go out and grab me some sunbeams, we know they're valuable, right? Well, grab me some. Could you bring them in here? Let's talk about sunbeams. Well, you know, children, they'll take you up on this. They'll dance around a little while and try to grab them, but they can't. The fact is that something as esoteric and mystical as sunbeams is captured by nature's photovoltaic array called photosynthesis in plants, through the chlorophyll of plants, and specifically grass. So, the problem is that most of us in our modern culture are quite disconnected from grass. When I say grass, you know, people immediately think of lawns, golf courses, maybe a soccer field. But you're not thinking about the kind of grass that the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe found in the early 1700s when Governor Spotswood, the colonial governor of Virginia, sent his friends, dubbed the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, I mean, they were British after all, sent them across the Blue Ridge. The British had bumped up here against the Blue Ridge. What was over Afton Mountain? What was over there? So he sent them over to discover what was there. And what they found, they wrote back, and they spent a couple of weeks, and they said, everywhere we rode in the Shenandoah Valley, we could take the grass and tie it in a knot above the horse's saddle. It was a magnificent silvopasture of elk, deer, passenger pigeons, prairie chickens, pheasant, turkey, and bison, up to herds of 3 to 4 million. Captain Jim Bridger got behind a herd out in the Black Hills of Dakotas when he was sent out to explore it, behind 7 million bison. Now that's always intrigued me. You know, can you, Lieutenant, could you come up here a minute, please? Sharpen your quill. Start counting. 1, 2. You got that? 2, 3. Yeah. I have no idea. All right, but the legacy of these migratory herds that were moved by both natural and Native American lit fires as a landscape choreography, and these migratory patterns where they moved thousands of miles, created the soils that we are currently mining today in the Midwest, and that we already mined in Virginia, up to 3 feet of topsoil washed off of Virginia during the European colonialization of the state, and up until today, and is still washing off today, because we have turned this beautiful perennial-based system into an annually based tillage system, which is highly erosive. In the Shenandoah Valley, where I live, arguably 3 to 5 feet of topsoil have washed out and created the turbidity in today's Chesapeake Bay. But how does nature actually work? How nature works is sunbeams come down, it's captured by photosynthesis and converted into biomass, into vegetable material. And if we look at the different kinds of plants, trees, bushes, and grass, intuitively we think, well, what's the most efficacious plant to collect these sunbeams and turn them into and sequester the carbon? Well, your mind tends to go to trees because you can see, oh, wow, look at all that biomass. But in actuality, trees are the least efficient. Brush is more efficient, bushes and brush and things like that. And then the pinnacle is grass. The fact is that when you look at a forest, you're seeing 50 to 80, maybe 100 years of stored carbon all standing visible. You're not seeing 80 years of grass visible at one time. Now, the grass goes through a growth cycle, just like us, just like all living things. It goes through a growth cycle. It starts slow, and then it accelerates, and then it goes into senescence. So the 3 stages of grass I call diaper stage. So right here in this pot, I have freshly eaten diaper stage. This is infant grass. It's just been grazed and it's coming back. Here I have teenage grass. Okay, juvenile fast growth grass. Remember when you could eat a half a gallon of ice cream and it didn't go on your hips? This is juvenile grass. And then we come into more juvenile, but you see it's starting to brown down, and eventually it goes to what I call nursing home grass. Okay? Senescence, the end. The role of the herbivore in nature, if you've ever thought about it, and the reason I'm concentrating on this is because herbivores have gotten a bad rap in recent days. Cows, climate change, and all that stuff. You see, the data points to study the effect of cows on the environment are all coming from a position that does not respect and honor the herbivore in its classic role. The role of the herbivore, and the reason the planet is so full of herbivores, think about Africa, think about South America, the alpacas, think about Indochina, yaks. I mean, they're all over the place. Reindeer, caribou. There's a lot of herbivores, groundhogs, prairie, everything. Is because without them, this biomass would simply turn into senescent material and just volatilize and die and quit growing. So the role of the herbivore in nature is to take this as it approaches senescence, prune it back, just like a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard or an orchardist would prune an apple tree. Does anyone think ill of an orchardist? Why are you pruning your apple tree? No. We think that's good. We think that's good stewardship. And that's exactly what the herbivores did. So they pruned this back to restart this rapid biomass production. Without them, it stops. The whole program stops. Now the problem is, how do we duplicate this if we don't have migratory patterns? If we don't have 4 million buffalo in a herd? If we don't have 10 million wolves chasing them? If we don't have fire? If we don't have the magnificent, amazing choreography of nature, how do we duplicate this amazing principle that hydrated, built soil, fed all the mycorrhizae and the actinomycetes and built the soils that we're still mining today? Well, we do it with high-tech electric fencing. Space-age, microchipped electric fencing. It's almost invisible to the eye, and yet we can encircle a herd of 1,000 cows with almost an invisible wire that you would never see. I mean, visitors to our farm have to watch the wire. They walk into it, and so, it's practically invisible. But because it's such a strong psychological barrier, the cows learn, and they can see way better than us. In fact, they can see all the way around their heads. So, well, except for 30 degrees on their back end. So they can see this, they know it's there, and it allows us to duplicate this mobbed movement that they would have had in eons before we had private land. And so we call this mob stalking, herbivorous solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration. And so as the biomass gets to this point, we prune it back with the herbivore, and then it begins to grow. And as the leaf area begins to get more and more chlorophyll, the growth accelerates and accelerates, so that from here to here is, let's just say for sake of discussion, from here to here, this time period is 20 days. From here to here, the time period is only 10 days. All right? So it's accelerating, and then it slows off. So what we're doing is using the herbivore, in this case a cow, it could be a sheep or a goat or whatever, but in this case a cow. We're using the animal in its historic role, using high-tech electric fencing in order to leverage and stimulate the biomass production. The bottom line is that in Augusta County, where I live, which is over the mountain, in Augusta County, the average pasture, the biomass production, if you dry it down and you weigh it, the biomass production on the average acre of grass in Augusta County is 2,500 pounds per year. On our farm, we've been there almost 60 years. We've never planted a seed. We've never bought a bag of chemical fertilizer. And on our farm, we average well over 10,000 pounds per acre. You know, we're all familiar with the tension between ecology and economy, and that there's a battle, and we can't be environmentally sensitive unless we sacrifice the economy, and we can't be economically viable unless we sacrifice the environment. And I'm here to present to you the notion as a fact that we can actually have both. But what we have to do is manage things completely differently. You see, the data points that impugn the lowly cow as the destroyer of the planet have the wrong object to have a problem with. The problem is not the herbivore. The herbivore is doing what she's always done. She's, a four-wheel drive portable sauerkraut vat, turning carbohydrate, fermenting it into, meat and milk, nutrient-dense food. She's doing exactly what she was supposed to do. But she's not being managed the way the wild herds and the migratory patterns were managed, where they moved and they vacated areas long enough for the forage to go through this magnificent 50, 60, 70-day physiological expression cycle, and then be pruned back and harvested at the appropriate time. In fact, what happens is that on most pastures, even at this, the grass never even can grow to this point. It's kept very, very short. So it's pruned 20 times in a season, and you add up all those little couple hundred pounds a time, and it comes out to about 2,500 pounds per year. Instead, we let the forage come way up here to full physiological expression. By denying access, we move the cows every day to a new spot, letting everything else rest and go through this rapid accumulation cycle. And what it means is that we triple, quadruple, and even quintuple the amount of forage that can be produced on a certain area. Now, that cow is dropping 50 pounds of goodies out her back end every day. So just think about what happens when you change it from 4,000 pounds of manure and urine per acre to 20,000 pounds of manure and urine per acre. Suddenly, you have soil building capacity. So here we are not only harvesting way more, but we're sequestering way more carbon. We're using the animal in its historic role. We're honoring and respecting the cowness of the cow. When you feed the herbivore foreign things like grain, and you lock them up in a feedlot, and you do all the kinds of desecrating things, I mean the U.S. duh, I call it the U.S. duh, for 30 years, laughed at us for doing this. They said, grind up dead cows, feed them back to cows, and we were branded Luddites and anti-progressives, anti-science, Go on, get with the program, Salatin, what's this grass stuff? 40 years later, there's this sudden global, oops, maybe we shouldn't ought have done that. And it's beyond me why we still give these sophisticated agents of our culture the freedom to tell us what to eat and how to eat.
And socialism.
But because they are lying, it's possible to expose them. This is their Achilles heel. By comparison, we have nothing to hide, therefore we have no reason to lie. And we wouldn't want to even if we could. Truth is a far superior weapon than deceit. It's a weapon which is denied to them. And in the end, it will be the decisive weapon that destroys them completely.
Yes. So, of course, 4th of July, right? Then you have to attack at every front, right? So this year, it's grilling. Grilling. The grilling.
Admit it, grilling is bad. I saw this going around. Josh Barrow, I don't know, Business Insider. I was clicking around. I was looking, who wrote this article, let's see, his columnist for the Insider, co-host of Popat. I'm like, what the hell is Popat? I go and I look and I'm banned. I'm blocked from his Twitter for his stupid little,
blocked from his twit.
Blocked from his twit, from his dumb little podcast. Anyway, he says, your grill is filthy, has poor temperature control, and for some idiot reason has the heating element below the food. So if that drips into it and catches fire, there's a better way to cook inside your kitchen. And then, so don't grill, don't
kitchen.
Be outside.
Go back in the kitchen.
Exactly.
That's what Josh is saying.
And we're saying learn to grill. I saw there was a lot of good responses, and someone says, quick, it's one of the most popular grilling weekends of the year. Someone write an article shitting on grilling for hate clicks. Business Insider editors.
Yeah.
And then there were other people that were saying, counterpoint, learn to grill, use charcoal. 1, 2, yes. When grilling, sear, indirect equals you aren't dripping onto the heating element. 3, buy a rotisserie collar and experience the joy of tender self-basting. You'll never be able to make meat candy like this in the oven. It's impossible. And I even saw another one. It's obvious you never learned to grill properly or heard of indirect heat. And someone's showing their fancy setup that they have that looks like it could be inside a gourmet kitchen. Right. And then I saw that Food Insider, they had a little poll like, so did he convince you that grilling is bad? And 91% of people said no, he did not.
He got ratioed pretty hard, actually, right?
And it's like, there's a reason why, he was saying, there's a reason why people go to good restaurants to eat good food. It's all about precision and control and the appliances. And like, there's a reason why people like to grill outside, because it's fun and it's as old as it gets, right? Grilling meat over the fire outside.
Ice Age television, and you get food out of it, right? It's, it's literally connecting with as many aspects that you can with your primordial self, right? In a way, your genetic memories.
We love grilling outside.
Tied to fire, tied to that way of cooking and stuff like that. But and I wanted to just reiterate, some of these articles are a few years old now, but remember this was this last year? Yeah, last year. If you barbecue on July 4th, you're building on a black American legacy. So it's racist if you do it if you're white. So it's cultural appropriation. Here's another one, 6 years old.
Cooking meat over fire, come on.
To do this for a while now.
They're owning that.
So the Guardian has been trying to do this for quite a few years now. Barbecue is an American tradition of enslaved Africans and Native Americans, because white people never grilled meat over an open fire before. It just doesn't happen. So you gotta shit on it somehow, right? And so remember, the next step now too is you gotta forbid it's too much carbon dioxide, right, coming off of the charcoal and stuff.
Yeah, they'll try and do away with barbecues for sure, and open fires in general, just campfires.
Campfires, yeah. If you have wet fuel, right, in the UK, what was it again? In your wood stove, if you have wet logs that you're burning, that was too much, water vapor is released or something, so they're banning that. Check this out. So that we know that they hate meat, right? They want to get you off of meat. This clip was going around. I think this was originally from Ice Age Farmer, but look at this guy. He's a bioethicist, and he's going to tell us some ways that we can engineer humans, right? One of the themes today is augmented humanity, basically. We'll talk more about that later, but this can open that up a little bit. Check out what they want to do regarding stopping meat consumption, because that's where these globalists are going.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, check this out.
So I'll give 2 examples. So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance, and some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of
Goddamn
bovine
fucking
proteins.
morons.
And there's
Let's make you
actually
allergic to
analogs
it,
of
right?
this in life. There's this thing called the long-star tick,
We
where if it
evolved
bites
eating meat,
you will
you
become allergic
fucking
to
moron.
meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So
good.
that's something that we can do through human engineering. We
Isn't
can
that like
kind
a Lyme
of
disease?
possibly address really big world problems.
Yeah, just global warming, so we got to stop meat consumption. So let's just let's
You
not
first,
have
buddy.
any.
When we look at climate on long scales, we're looking for geological material that actually records climate. If we're to take an ice sample, for example, we use isotopes to reconstruct temperature, but the atmosphere that's imprisoned in that ice, we liberate, and then we look at the CO2 content.
Professor Clark and others have indeed discovered, as Al Gore says, a link between carbon dioxide and temperature. But what Al Gore doesn't say is that the link is the wrong way round.
So here we're looking at the ice core record from Vostok. And in the red, we see temperature going up from early time to later time at a very key interval when we came out of a glaciation. And we see the temperature going up, and then we see the CO2 coming up. CO2 lags behind that increase. It's got an 800-year lag. So temperature is leading CO2 by 800 years.
There have now been several major ice core surveys. Every one of them shows the same thing. The temperature rises or falls, and then, after a few hundred years, carbon dioxide follows.
So obviously, carbon dioxide is not the cause of that warming. In fact, we can say that the warming produced the increase in carbon dioxide.
CO2 clearly cannot be causing temperature changes. It's a product of temperature. It's following temperature changes.
Again,
The ice core
they
record
got the
goes to the
science
very
wrong.
heart of
Those
the problem we
climate
have here.
change
They said
alarmists.
if the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
But how can it be that higher temperatures lead to more CO2 in the atmosphere? To understand this, we must first restate the obvious point that carbon dioxide is a natural gas produced by all living things.
Listen
Few
carefully.
things annoy me more than to hear people talking about carbon dioxide as being a pollutant. You're made of carbon dioxide. I'm made of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is how living things grow.
What's more, humans are not the main source of carbon dioxide. Carl Wunsch is Professor of Oceanography at MIT. He was also visiting Professor in Oceanography at Harvard University and University College London, and a Senior Visiting Fellow in Mathematics and Physics at the University of Cambridge. He is the author of 4 major textbooks on oceanography.
The ocean is the major reservoir into which carbon dioxide goes when it comes out of the atmosphere, or from which it is re-emitted to the atmosphere. If you heat the surface of the ocean, it tends to emit carbon dioxide. So similarly, if you cool the ocean surface, the ocean can dissolve more carbon dioxide.
So the warmer the oceans, the more carbon dioxide they produce, and the cooler they are, the more they suck in. But why is there a time lag of hundreds of years between a change in temperature and a change in the amount of carbon dioxide going into or out of the sea? The reason is that oceans are so big and so deep, they take literally hundreds of years to warm up and cool down. This time lag means the oceans have what scientists call a memory of temperature changes.
The ocean has a memory of past events running out as far as 10,000 years. So, for example, if somebody says, oh, I'm seeing changes in the North Atlantic, this must mean that the climate system is changing. It may only mean that something happened in a remote part of the ocean decades or hundreds of years ago, whose effects are now beginning to show up in the North Atlantic.
Carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, first of all, is a trace element, a trace gas. It's about, if you look at a football stadium with 100,000 people in it, each person representing a molecule of the atmosphere, I think carbon dioxide would be about 35 or 36 people. And the human contribution to that may be that little guy with the red hat down there in row 3. I mean, it's minuscule. And even if we double the carbon dioxide, then we got 2 little guys in red hats among 100,000 people. So, I just feel that we're being arrogant in the fact that we're, controlling the climate.
Now, this amount of CO2, somebody might say, oh, well, it may be so very small, but it is so powerful. Well, in fact, is it so powerful?
Carbon dioxide is causing all of these huge problems in the world. That carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is a component of the atmosphere. And everything you can say about carbon dioxide, you can also say about oxygen. So is oxygen a pollutant? Is water a pollutant?
Let's not even sell them the propaganda, because we won't even be able to do that, step one. We'll just have to make them allergic to meat by coercively engineering them with this kind of bug or beetle or something, right? Or
Can you believe
right? But anyway, we'll
trying to think about human nutrition and how to optimally feed people in a way that we could come back 1,000 years from now and humanity is still here and the ecosystem is largely intact. When we lay the Venn diagrams of what may be optimal human nutrition over what may be long-term sustainable, like over the course of thousands of years, they may actually have far more in common than anything that comes out of the industrial row crop food system.
Take a trip through the aisles of the local grocery store and you'll find one processed food after another.
In any given month, 8 out of 10 Americans will eat or drink something that is processed with an ingredient they know absolutely nothing about.
We now have a diet that is more radically different than any diet ever consumed throughout the millions of years of human evolution. We've created the worst food on the planet and exported it to every country in the world.
The agricultural revolution has been transitioned into the processed food revolution. Very conservative estimates suggest that the U.S. in particular has maybe 15 to 20 years before we're largely bankrupt from diabetes-related costs.
We have completely changed the way that we live as human beings in the last few decades, and we've alienated ourselves from our heritage.
This is what's driving our chronic disease epidemic. And if we don't take steps to create a more supportive food environment, then it's really kind of an uphill battle that I don't think we can win.
These are the grazing lands, the rangelands of this country. Nearly 900 million acres of them, over a third of the United States, devoted for generations to the raising of livestock.
The most nutrient-dense diet that we see for humans involves raising animals from grasslands into a nutrient-dense food that humans can eat.
There are a number of nutrients that we can only get from animal foods. We do need to consume animals.
We're just fooling ourselves. If we think that we can feed the world through crop production alone, we are setting ourselves up for eventual global famine.
Meat is probably public enemy number one at the moment. I've never seen such an organised campaign against a substance that we have been eating for 3.5 million years.
There's a legitimate case against farmers that whatever they've been doing to the land has resulted in less nature, less wild rivers. We've just changed things too far and too much.
If we continue to degrade our soils, then we're damaging the entire ecosystem.
It's a false choice between it being wild or between farmed. There's a much better option, which is persuade people like me to be good at both.
Well-managed grazing has such a hugely beneficial impact that it actually has a net positive impact on global warming.
There's no reason why farmers couldn't be paid to be carbon stewards. That offers the best single hope for avoiding irreversible climate change.
Come on!
It's really about farming mirroring nature, rather than just always looking for technology and chemical and pharmaceutical solutions to every problem.
We are at the beginning of the greatest transition in the history of agriculture, and I feel incredibly optimistic that we can achieve that transition.